On a night when the rain erased every safe path, Caleb found a blind golden retriever sitting alone listening instead of seeing. The dog wasn't broken by injury, he was abandoned because he couldn't see. When the flood came, the dog disappeared into the darkness, trapped between rising water and fear. No rescue team could reach him. Only one thing remained, a human voice calling from the storm. Could a blind dog trust one step forward? And could one ordinary man become the miracle God placed in his path? What happens next will remind you that faith doesn't need sight. Before we begin, please subscribe, like this video, and tell us where you're watching from. Your support truly means everything to us. Rain had been falling for days, steady and colorless, turning the river town in southern Washington into a blur of wet asphalt. Sagging clouds and reflections that never stayed still. The gas station had been closed long enough for the sign to fade unevenly, the red letters peeling like scabs that never healed right. Water pooled across the cracked parking lot, filling old oil stains and tire grooves until the ground looked like it was dissolving. Beyond it, the river swelled quietly, thick and brown, moving faster than it should have for this time of year. The puppy sat near the edge of the lot, where the pavement sloped downward, its pale golden fur darkened by rain. It was small, no more than 5-month-old ribs, faintly visible beneath a soaked coat that still held the softness of early puppyhood. Its eyes were cloudy, unfocused, reflecting nothing, not the gas station lights, not the passing headlights, not the world pressing in from all sides. Blind from birth, though no one standing there would have known the reason. What they would have noticed was how still it was. The puppy didn't bark, didn't whine, didn't pace. It only turned its head slightly whenever a car passed ears, twitching, tracking sound with careful precision. Each movement was measured cautious, as if the rain itself might change shape if it moved too fast. Its tail lay flat against the wet ground, heavy with water, unmoving. It looked like a dog waiting for instructions that never came. Caleb Turner noticed it because he had already stopped noticing most things. At 41, Caleb had the kind of face people described as weathered, even when they meant tired. His jaw was broad and squared, shadowed with dark stubble. He rarely bothered to shave anymore. Fine lines cut deep around his mouth, not from smiling, but from holding words back. His hair, once a deep brown, had started to thin at the temples and curl unevenly when damp, which it always was these days. Rain darkened his work jacket as he stepped out of his pickup boots, splashing lightly in shallow water. Caleb worked maintenance for the county pipes, drainage, emergency repairs jobs that never waited for good weather. The work suited him because it required little conversation and rewarded patience more than speed. Years ago, he had been someone quicker to speak quicker, to laugh. That had changed after an accident on a flooded worksite took the life of a coworker. He'd trained a younger man who had trusted Caleb's call when he said the ground would hold. Since then, Caleb had learned the weight of hesitation and the cost of being wrong. He had pulled into the lot to wait out the worst of the rain. Just 5 minutes, he'd told himself. Long enough for the downpour to ease. Long enough to breathe. That was when he felt it. Not a sound. Not movement. Just the distinct sense of being oriented toward. Caleb turned his head slowly and saw the puppy sitting alone near the far edge of the lot. At first, he thought it might be injured or dead. The stillness was that complete. But then a semi roared past on the road, spraying water outward, and the puppy's head turned immediately precise and smooth, following the sound until it faded. Caleb's chest tightened. He took a few careful steps closer, boots scuffing wet gravel. The puppy didn't move away, didn't stiffen. It simply turned its head again, aligning its body toward his voice when he spoke without realizing he had. "Hey," Caleb said quietly. The puppy's ears perked, its head tilted toward him with uncanny accuracy. It did not stand. It did not wag its tail, but its posture changed just slightly, as if something inside it leaned forward. Caleb swallowed. Up close, he could see the dog's eyes clearly now, the milky haze, the absence of focus, the way the gaze passed through him instead of landing on him. A blind dog, and young, too young to be alone like this. There was no leash, no collar, no crate, no sign taped to a post or bag of food left nearby. Nothing to suggest intention or explanation. Just a dog placed where someone could drive away without looking back. Caleb crouched slowly, knees protesting. The rain soaked through his jeans immediately. "You okay, buddy?" he asked softer now. The puppy shifted its weight forward, but stopped short, nose lifting slightly as it tested the air. Rainwater dripped from its whiskers. Its body trembled, not violently, not from fear, but from cold held too long. Caleb reached out, hesitated, then pulled his hand back. He knew better than to surprise a blind animal. He stayed where he was, letting his presence be known only by sound. "I'm not going to touch you," he said, "just letting you know I'm here." For a moment, nothing happened. Then the puppy took one small step toward him. Caleb felt something twist sharply in his chest, something he hadn't felt in years, the dangerous pull of responsibility before logic had time to intervene. He was already calculating. Shelters were full. His schedule was packed. His life had been arranged carefully to avoid exactly this kind of complication. A sudden screech of brakes cut through the rain. Caleb flinched and turned instinctively toward the road as a delivery truck fishtailed slightly before regaining control. Water sprayed high, a white curtain thrown up by spinning tires. When the noise faded and the rain settled back into its steady rhythm, Caleb turned around. The puppy was gone. The place where it had been sitting was empty, disturbed only by ripples spreading across shallow water. No golden shape, no movement, just rain filling in the space where something had been. Caleb stood there longer than made sense, rain soaking him through eyes scanning the lot, as if the dog might reappear if he looked hard enough. His heart beat faster, an uncomfortable, familiar rhythm, the one that came with realizing you might have missed the moment that mattered. Somewhere beyond the edge of the parking lot, the river moved faster than before. And Caleb had the sinking feeling that whatever choice he hadn't made yet was already being made for him. Caleb found the puppy at the far edge of the parking lot, near where the asphalt gave up and became loose gravel mixed with mud. It stood there awkwardly, rain clinging to its fur body, angled slightly away from the open space, as if the emptiness itself were dangerous. The puppy trembled not violently, but with a quiet persistence that spoke of cold endured too long rather than fear. Its head lifted when Caleb spoke again, turning with careful precision toward his voice. Up close, the clouded eyes were impossible to miss, pale, unfocused, reflecting nothing. Whatever had taken the dog from its original spot, it had not taken its attention away from sound. Caleb crouched again, slower this time, conscious of how exposed the dog already was. The puppy took one step forward, then stopped abruptly, paws planted as if an invisible line ran across the ground. That hesitation struck him harder than the rain. It wasn't the reaction of a feral animal or a frightened stray. It was the pause of something that had learned through repetition, that moving too far on its own led to loss. "There you are," Caleb said quietly. The puppy's ears flicked. Its nose lifted, testing the air, then lowered again. No collar marked its neck. No rope burn, no sign of restraint. Whoever had left it hadn't needed to tie it down. Blindness had done that work for them. Caleb straightened slowly, feeling the stiffness in his knees and lower back protest. He ran a hand through his damp hair, rainwater trickling down his wrist. He told himself to think practically. Shelters were full. Blind dogs were harder to place. He worked long hours and lived alone in a small house that stayed too quiet even when the radio was on. This wasn't a good idea. Still, he spoke again, just to see. "My name's Caleb." The puppy didn't react to the name, of course, but it leaned forward slightly at the sound of his voice weight shifting in anticipation. Its tail gave a small, uncertain sweep against its hind leg. That was all it took. Caleb sighed a long breath that felt like giving something up. He slipped off his jacket and held it out, shaking it gently so the dog could hear where it was. "I'm right here," he said. "You don't have to move." After a moment, the puppy stepped forward, muzzle brushing the damp fabric. It froze, then pressed its nose more firmly into the jacket, breathing in as if anchoring itself. Caleb felt his chest tighten again, sharper now. He draped the jacket loosely over the puppy's back, careful not to startle it. The trembling eased just slightly. Getting the puppy to the truck took patience. Caleb didn't lift it. He didn't tug. He stood beside the open passenger door and talked about nothing important, about the rain, about how miserable the weather was, about a bad cup of coffee he'd had earlier that day. Slowly guided only by sound and proximity, the puppy followed. When it bumped into the truck's step, it startled and backed away, heart hammering so hard Caleb could see it in the rise of its chest. "It's okay," he said quickly. "Just a step." This time, he tapped the metal lightly with his knuckle, letting the dog map the obstacle through sound. The puppy tried again, climbing in with awkward determination, nails scraping. When it finally settled on the seat, it curled into itself, tucking its head down as if minimizing its presence made it safer. The drive to Caleb's house took 15 minutes. The windshield wipers worked overtime, smearing rain into long gray arcs. The puppy stayed perfectly still the entire time, bracing itself against the seat with its body ears shifting at every change in engine noise. It did not whine. It did not pace. It simply endured. Caleb's house sat on the edge of town, a one-story structure with peeling white paint and a sagging porch roof. Inside it smelled faintly of machine oil and old coffee. He guided the puppy in, gently narrating each step, each doorway. The dog followed closely, bumping into his leg once, then staying there, pressed against him like a shadow. In the kitchen, Caleb knelt again and set down a bowl of water. The puppy found it by sound and smell, then drank cautiously, stopping every few seconds, as if expecting the bowl to disappear. Caleb watched arms resting on his knees, something heavy settling behind his ribs. "Someone walked you away," he murmured, not expecting an answer. "Didn't they?" The puppy finished drinking and sat head-angled toward him, waiting. Caleb fetched a towel and dried the dog slowly, speaking the entire time. As he worked, he noticed how young it really was, the softness of its ears, the slightly oversized paws, the way its body leaned instinctively into warmth. Too young to understand why someone would leave without a sound. When he finished, the puppy lowered itself onto the kitchen floor and stayed there, curled but alert. Caleb stood unsure what to do next. He had brought the dog inside, but he hadn't decided anything beyond that. Behind him, the rain continued to fall steady and indifferent. And in the quiet of the house, Caleb understood that this wasn't about rescue or charity. It was about whether he would pretend once again that noticing was enough. Caleb named the puppy Milo on the third morning, not because the name felt perfect, but because saying something was better than letting the silence decide. He said it aloud while setting a bowl down on the kitchen floor, his voice steady, casual, as if Milo had always belonged there. The dog lifted its head immediately, ears angling toward the sound body, leaning just enough to suggest recognition without certainty. Caleb repeated the name once more slower. Milo did not wag his tail, but he stayed where he was listening, as if filing the sound away for later use. The house began to take shape for Milo through cues Caleb hadn't realized he was offering. The soft creak of the third stair, the hollow echo near the hallway closet, the way the refrigerator hummed more loudly at night. Milo traced the rooms cautiously, nose close to the floor paws, testing each step before committing his weight. He moved like someone learning a foreign language by ear alone, slow, deliberate, unwilling to assume anything. When he bumped into a chair leg, he paused, recalibrated, and stepped around it the next time, without hesitation. Caleb watched all of this with a mixture of admiration and unease. He had spent years training himself to anticipate problems before they happened, to memorize spaces so thoroughly that nothing could surprise him. Milo was doing the same thing, only with higher stakes and fewer tools. It unsettled him how familiar that felt. By the end of the week, Milo could navigate the house without guidance. He knew where the water bowl lived by the sound of the tap, and where the back door was by the draft that slipped in through its warped frame. He slept curled near the couch, close enough to hear Caleb's breathing at night, far enough to avoid being stepped on if Caleb moved suddenly. When rain fell, Milo listened intently to the pattern on the roof, as if mapping the weather by rhythm alone. What he didn't do was follow Caleb to the door. The first time Caleb noticed, he thought it was coincidence. He grabbed his keys, pulled on his boots, and opened the door to leave for work. Milo lifted his head ears forward, but didn't stand. Caleb paused, keys jangling in his hand. "You coming?" he asked, half joking. Milo remained where he was. Caleb shrugged it off and stepped outside. When he returned that evening, soaked and tired, Milo was sitting in the exact same place, body upright, head angled toward the door. Not asleep, not restless, waiting. The pattern repeated itself. Every departure ended the same way. Milo would rise, walk to the doorway, and stop just short of the threshold. He would sit there perfectly still, ears trained on the outside world, as if crossing that invisible line carried consequences he wasn't willing to test. Hours later, when Caleb returned, Milo would lift his head and turn toward the sound of Key's tail sweeping the floor once in quiet relief. Caleb tried coaxing him. He knelt, called softly, tapped the porch boards with his knuckles so Milo could locate the space by sound. Milo would approach the doorway, nose twitching, then retreat again, choosing the safety of waiting over the risk of being wrong. It gnawed at Caleb more than he expected. One afternoon, his neighbor stopped by unannounced. Sarah Whitman lived 2 houses down, a woman in her early 50s, with a tall, narrow frame and prematurely silver hair she wore in a loose braid down her back. Her skin was weathered from years of outdoor work, freckles scattered across her cheeks like remnants of a younger life. She had once been a school librarian until budget cuts pushed her into early retirement. Since then, she'd filled her days with gardening and keeping an eye on the street. She stood on the porch with a paper bag in her hands, rain jacket zipped to her chin. "Saw you bring in a dog," she said, voice warm but cautious. "Thought you might need these." Inside the bag were old towels and a bag of dog food unopened. Caleb hesitated, then stepped aside. Sarah noticed Milo immediately. She crouched, keeping her movements slow, her voice low. "Hey there," she said, not reaching out. Milo angled his head toward her, listening. "He blind?" she asked gently. "Yeah," Caleb said. "From birth." Sarah nodded, as if that explained more than it should have. "My sister had a dog like that once. Smart as hell, just needed people who didn't disappear on him." The words landed heavier than Sarah intended. She seemed to realize it too, offering a small, apologetic smile before standing. "He'll figure you out," she added. "They always do if you stay." That night, Caleb sat on the kitchen floor beside Milo, back against the cabinet. He didn't pet him. He didn't speak. He simply stayed. Milo shifted closer, inch by inch, until his shoulder pressed against Caleb's leg. The contact was light, tentative, but deliberate. Caleb closed his eyes and listened to the rain on the roof, the same rain that had started all of this. He understood now what Milo was waiting for at the door. Not permission, not guidance, proof. The rain changed its tone sometime after midnight. It was no longer the steady, patient sound Milo had learned to read like a second language. This rain came down in sheets, sharp and insistent, hammering the roof hard enough to rattle the windows. Wind followed soon after, pushing against the house in uneven bursts, slipping through the loose seams of the old structure with a low, whistling moan. Caleb was already awake when the alert came through on his phone. A flood warning, rising river levels, immediate response needed in the lower blocks near the bend. He sat on the edge of the bed, shoulders slumped forward, reading the message twice. This was his job. This was what he had trained himself to do, show up when things were breaking. Milo lifted his head from the floor beside the bed, ears swiveling. The change in sound had put him on edge. His breathing was faster now, shallow, as if the air itself felt unstable. "It's okay," Caleb said, though he wasn't sure who he was reassuring. He pulled on his boots, the familiar scrape of rubber soles against tile echoing through the house. Milo followed the sound, rising carefully, body tense. When Caleb reached for his jacket, a gust of wind slammed into the back of the house hard enough to make the walls creak. The back door burst open. The sound was violent wood cracking against its frame, rain exploding, inward wind howling through the sudden opening. Milo, startled, spinning in place, paws scrambling for traction. His world, carefully mapped by sound and scent, shattered in an instant. "Milo," Caleb shouted, turning too late. The rain drowned out everything. Milo bolted, not with purpose, not with fear, but with instinct. Noise pulled him in every direction at once. The open door screamed of wind and water and movement. He ran toward it, heart-pounding ears overwhelmed by chaos. The threshold he had never crossed before vanished beneath his paws. Outside, the ground was slick and unfamiliar. Rain flattened his fur water, splashing up against his legs. Milo slowed, confused, head swinging side to side, searching for the one sound that mattered. But Caleb's voice was lost behind him, swallowed by wind and distance. Another surge of rain sent water rushing along the side of the house, funneling toward the storm drain at the edge of the yard. The roar of it was deep, rhythmic, impossible to ignore. Milo turned toward it, drawn not by curiosity, but by the need to locate something constant, something loud enough to follow. By the time Caleb fought his way back through the wind to the door, Milo was gone. Caleb stood there for a heartbeat, rain soaking him instantly, the open doorway yawning like a mistake he couldn't undo. "Milo," he yelled again, voice raw. No response, only rain and rushing water. He searched the yard quickly, sweeping a flashlight beam across mud and grass, calling Milo's name until his throat burned. The beam caught on overturned bins, broken branches, pooling water, but no pale shape, no movement. The river siren wailed in the distance, long and low. Caleb swore under his breath and forced himself to stop. Panic wouldn't help. Milo wouldn't come running at a shout. He had never done that. Caleb shut the door against the wind, grabbed his radio, and made the call he had been trying to avoid. Unit 3 responding, he said, voice tight. "I've got personal loss. I'll be back." The drive through town was chaos. Streets flooded, headlights cutting tunnels through rain. Caleb worked on instinct, clearing debris, redirecting traffic, sandbagging where he could. But every task felt mechanical, his mind elsewhere, replaying the sound of the door slamming open, the frantic scramble of paws on tile. By the time he returned home, the rain had eased slightly, though the river had not. The yard was a mess of churned mud and scattered debris. Caleb knelt near the back step, scanning the ground with his light. Their faint impressions in the mud, small, careful paw prints, uneven but deliberate, leading away from the house. Caleb followed them slowly, heart hammering. The prints angled toward the tree line, then curved again, drawn toward the low, constant roar of water. Toward the river. He reached the edge of the embankment and stopped. Below, the river had swollen beyond its banks, dark and fast, chewing away at the shoreline. The paw prints ended where the ground dipped sharply, the mud washed smooth by rising water. Milo. Caleb whispered the name, catching in his chest. He stood there long after the rain thinned to a mist flashlight beam trembling in his hand. He imagined Milo standing somewhere out there, soaked and disoriented, waiting at another invisible threshold, unsure whether to move or stay still. And for the first time since bringing Milo home, Caleb understood the weight of what he had promised without saying it. Caleb followed the river by sound before he followed it by sight. The roar was louder here, swollen and uneven, chewing at the banks with a patience that felt cruel. Rain slicked his hair to his forehead and soaked through his clothes until the cold pressed inward, dull and constant. He moved slowly, flashlight lowered, calling Milo's name in a steady rhythm, not shouting, not pleading, because panic changed the shape of a voice, and Milo needed the familiar shape more than volume. "Milo," he said every few steps. "I'm here." The beam finally caught a pale curve against the darkness. Milo stood on a narrow shelf of earth where the bank had not yet collapsed, a strip of ground no wider than a door. Water surged past him on both sides, foaming and loud, the current dragging branches and debris like warnings that refused to be subtle. Milo's fur was plastered flat, his body trembling hard enough that Caleb could see it from 10 yards away. The dog's head was angled forward, ears pinned by rain, listening. Caleb stopped where he was. If he moved closer, the ground might give. If Milo moved at all without direction, the water would take him. The river had already eaten half the bank. There was no space for error left. Caleb dropped to one knee and set the flashlight down, pointing it away so the glare wouldn't disorient the dog. He planted his boots and tested the ground with his weight, slow and careful. Mud shifted beneath him. He froze, breath shallow, then eased back until the earth felt solid again. "Milo," he said, lowering his voice. "Don't move." Milo didn't. That was the problem and the blessing both. He stood exactly where he was trusting the instruction, because it was clear and familiar. His paws were braced nails biting into wet dirt. The sound of the river battered him from all directions, but he held. Caleb scanned the area, heart-pounding mind, racing through options he didn't have. No rope long enough, no ladder, no angle that didn't put Milo between water and air with no margin. He keyed his radio, then hesitated. Static crackled back useless. A light appeared farther upriver, bobbing through rain. "Caleb," a voice called. It was Tom Alvarez, a volunteer with the county emergency crew. Tom was in his late 40s, compact and solid, with a square face and thick eyebrows that made his expressions look permanently concerned. Years working construction had left his hands broad and scarred fingers stiff in the cold. He moved with care, now knees bent, weight low, reading the ground the way men learn to when they'd seen it fail before. "I saw your truck," Tom said when he got close enough. "What have you got, my dog?" Caleb said. The word surprised him with its certainty. "Blind. He's stuck." Tom followed Caleb's gaze, jaw tightening when he saw Milo. "That shelf won't hold long, I know." Tom crouched beside him, rain dripping from the brim of his helmet. "We can't get a line across like this," he said. "Water's too fast. If he moves wrong—" "I know," Caleb said again. They fell silent, listening to the river decide nothing quickly. Milo shifted his weight, just a fraction. Dirt slid from beneath one paw. He stiffened, correcting instinctively breath-hitching. Caleb felt it in his own chest, a mirror response so sharp it hurt. "Milo," he said, voice steady, despite everything. "Listen to me." Tom watched him reading the situation with the practiced stillness of someone who understood limits. "If you call him," Tom said quietly, "he'll come. That's what dogs do." Caleb shook his head once. "Not him. He won't move unless he knows where to put his feet." "And do you?" Caleb looked at the gap between them, the churn of water, the narrowness of the earth that remained. He imagined stepping forward, imagined the bank giving way under his weight. He imagined Milo moving too soon, too fast. "I can't see a safe path," he said, "but I can make one." Tom frowned. How Caleb stood slowly, careful not to send vibrations through the ground. He took one step back from the edge, then another, widening the distance. "By staying put," he said, "by letting him come to sound, not to me." Tom followed his gaze, understanding dawning. "You're asking him to walk blind into noise. I'm asking him to walk toward my voice," Caleb said, "the way he always has." The rain eased slightly, thinning to a hard mist. The river did not notice. Caleb took a breath and began to speak, not calling Milo's name at first, but talking the way he had, in the truck, in the kitchen, in the quiet moments that had taught the dog how to listen. He described where he was. He described the ground. He described each step Milo would need to take, counting softly, rhythm, steady. "One step," he said. "That's it. Just one." Milo's ears flicked. His head turned locking onto the voice with complete focus. He did not move. Caleb swallowed. The choice sat heavy and immediate. Ask Milo to trust him now, or ask him to wait while the river decided for them. "Milo," he said, finally. The dog leaned forward, weight shifting paws, testing the edge of the earth that remained. Caleb lowered himself to his knees in the mud rain soaking through his jeans until the cold no longer felt sharp, just present. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't rush the moment. He spoke the way Milo had learned to trust slow, even each word shaped carefully so it didn't startle or blur into noise. "Milo," he said, steady as breath. "It's me." The river roared beside them, impatient and loud, but Milo's ears angled past it, filtering chaos the way he always had. His head turned toward Caleb with complete focus, body tightening, then loosening as the sound anchored him. He stood on the narrow shelf of earth paws, braced rain running down his spine, waiting for instruction. Caleb leaned forward slightly, palms open, hands low, so Milo could sense the space by sound and air. "You're safe," he said. "One step." Milo shifted his weight. Dirt crumbled beneath his left paw and slid into the water. He froze, heart racing, breath shallow. Caleb didn't move. "That's okay," he said. "Stay. You're doing fine." Behind him, Tom Alvarez stood still, arms out to the sides, ready but not intervening. The rain softened, thinning from sheets to a hard drizzle. The river remained violent, but the air felt less urgent, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Caleb spoke again, describing the space between them. Not where Milo was, but where he would be. "I'm right here. The ground is solid. One step, then stop." Milo lifted his front paw and placed it forward, slow and tentative. His nails scraped stone. He flinched, but didn't retreat. His body trembled harder now, every muscle engaged, fighting instinct that screamed for stillness. Caleb's voice didn't change. "Good," he said quietly. "That's it." Another step, then another. Each movement felt like time stretching thin, the space between sound and action filled with trust. Milo didn't rush. He didn't panic. He walked the way he had learned everything by listening first. When Milo's nose brushed Caleb's hand, the contact startled them both. Milo exhaled sharply, then pressed forward, collapsing against Caleb's chest with a force that knocked the breath from his lungs. Caleb wrapped his arms around him instinctively, holding the shaking body close, feeling the dog's heart hammering through wet fur. "I've got you," Caleb said, the words breaking, despite his effort to keep them steady. Tom moved quickly, then guiding them both back from the edge as the river claimed the last of the narrow shelf where Milo had stood. Mud slid away in a slow collapse, water swallowing the space without ceremony. They didn't speak until they were clear of the bank. Caleb sat on the ground, Milo curled against him, rain easing into a tired mist. The dog's breathing slowed, his body still pressed close, as if letting go even now felt dangerous. Caleb rested his chin against Milo's head, eyes closed, letting the moment imprint itself before it faded into memory. In the weeks that followed, the town recovered in pieces. Streets reopened, the river receded. Life resumed its careful pretending. Milo healed physically, though the tremor lingered in his sleep for a while, paws twitching as if still searching for solid ground. Caleb adjusted his life without ceremony. He rearranged furniture to create clear paths. He learned to announce himself before touching Milo. He learned that consistency mattered more than reassurance. And Milo learned that doors opening didn't always mean someone was leaving for good. It was Sarah Whitman who suggested the center. She stood in Caleb's kitchen one afternoon, watching Milo navigate the space with quiet confidence. "There's a community program downtown," she said. "Orientation training, support dogs, especially for people who can't see well." Caleb hesitated. "He's blind." Sarah smiled softly. "So are some of the people who need him." The center was a low brick building with wide hallways and floors that echoed gently underfoot. Milo took to it quickly. He learned routes by sound and texture. He learned to stop when hands reached out instead of stepping away. He learned that his stillness made others feel steady. One afternoon, a boy named Lucas arrived with his mother. Lucas was 11, small for his age, with dark hair that fell into his eyes no matter how often it was cut. His hands stayed clenched at his sides, knuckles pale. Vision loss from a degenerative condition had changed his world faster than he could explain. Milo sensed him immediately. He sat without being told, body relaxed, head angled toward the soft sound of Lucas's breathing. When Lucas reached out, tentative, Milo didn't move. He waited. Lucas's fingers brushed Milo's shoulder. He laughed, surprised, quiet, and sank down beside him. Milo leaned in, offering warmth without demand. Caleb watched from the doorway, something tight in his chest, loosening. Months later, Milo wore a simple harness, its fabric worn smooth by use. He moved through the center with calm certainty, a steady presence among people learning to trust space again. He did not lead by sight. He led by patience, by stillness, by the quiet confidence of someone who knew what it meant to step forward without seeing the ground ahead. On a clear evening, Caleb and Milo sat on the porch as the last of the rainy season gave way to dry air. Milo lay with his head against Caleb's leg, breathing slow and even. The river beyond the trees sounded ordinary again. Caleb rested a hand on Milo's back, feeling the steady rise and fall, and understood that light had never been about what you could see. Some miracles don't arrive with thunder or blinding light. They come quietly through a voice in the dark, a hand held steady, a choice to stay when it would be easier to walk away. We believe God often works this way, not by removing every storm, but by placing courage, compassion, and timing into ordinary people who decide to answer when something small and vulnerable is calling. Milo couldn't see the path ahead, but God gave him ears to listen, a heart to trust, and a human willing to kneel in the rain and speak life into the darkness. In our own lives, we may feel blind to the future, unsure where the safe ground is. Yet faith asks us to take the next step anyway, to listen for the voice that reminds us we are not forgotten, not abandoned, and never alone. Sometimes being someone's miracle is exactly how God becomes ours. If this story touched your heart, please share it so it can reach someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment and tell us where you're watching from or what this story made you feel. And subscribe to the channel to help us continue sharing stories of faith, compassion, and quiet miracles. May God bless you and your family. May He protect you in every storm, guide your steps when the way is unclear, and remind you always that even in the darkest moments, His light has not left you.